Goodness, a little bit bigger group, the second service here, so the pressure is on. I want to start out with a small testimonial involving me.
Hey, friends. What's going on? We're still waiting to hear from Courtney, so I am sorry to get everybody's hopes up. She's not quite out of court yet, but I couldn't wait. I just wanted to start because I have a lot of thoughts. But before that, I caught the rest of the live yesterday that I had to excuse myself from. So thank you everyone for your thoughtful conversation. It was a rough day. I feel like it was a pretty rough day. So let's see who's here. Oh, geez. Yeah, we're going to talk about this. DB, as handler, you're welcome to come on anytime. Hi, Post-Punk Mama. Hello, Kira. Big Fish. Big Fish, Small Pond, El Pasote, Fancy Drew. Hi, Em. Don't even get me started on box cutters. Gang, gang. Yeah, I'm going to get clapped for that intro, but I wanted to play it anyway, so it's worth it.
You rang?
Who do we have today? Who is joining us today, my dear?
Oh, I'm just riding this sinking ship over here.
Love that. I love that. Welcome, DB. How are you?
I'm good. We're all just kind of trying to cling on, as long as we can.
So you and Courtney and Fiend and the chat had a really, y'all were wilding last night about Walla.
Yeah.
So, a couple things. Oops. How do you feel today about Walla's testimony, having absorbed it?
As things came in yesterday, and as we read through the notes and there was developments and all this interesting information, I just started thinking, wow. And I, even in the chat, I told some people, let's just wait, guys. Let's see what this young lady has to say for herself, and so I thought, oh, wow, she got him the new tablet.
Yeah.
She fixed his window.
She did.
But I just could not get past that she dialed the phone.
Yeah.
For Mr. Richard Allen.
That blows.
That sucks real bad.
That really sucks. Yeah. I didn't actually catch that until I think after the fact. You and I were kind of unpacking and you told me that, and that blew my brains out of my head pretty much. That sucks.
I just don't understand what kind of condition you must be in, even if you've been in solitary confinement for a little while, a long while. Any while is a long while, but the ability to read the numbers on the buttons, because they said a cordless phone. So I'm guessing this is, a 2000s generation cordless phone, institutional DOC phone,
Yeah,
and I'm guessing it's not her cell phone. At least I hope it's not.
right.
And I just couldn't help but to think, what type of person, what type of condition does an otherwise healthy person, as far as their ability to live a normal life, regardless of their anxiety conditions or anything like that, they should be able to dial a phone. What kind of condition must someone be in to not be able to operate a phone?
Really bad condition.
Certainly, psychopathy, I mean, would be one of those conditions, I would assume.
Psychosis, you mean? Yeah,
Yes, psychosis.
100%. Totally.
Where
And
were you yesterday when there was all the mental health speculation?
I
Gee.
was hiding. I was eating steak and hiding from all of it. Honestly, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I'm not a psychologist. I don't see a ton of psychosis, but I've seen a little just as a therapist, as a clinical social worker. And I just know, even from working in rehab facilities, if somebody is in a really bad state mentally, whatever that means, you're going to want to stabilize them as much as you can before, like, why would you? I'm not saying she encouraged him to call, but what good can come from somebody contacting a loved one when they're in psychosis in general? Let's say he didn't even want to confess. He just wanted, I mean, it's really bizarre to me why she thought that would be a good idea.
Yeah,
Uh,
maybe, on our way to work, she was checking out some pods
listening to
and
some
just got
podcast.
inspired by some cops. Maybe there was an episode of Wrongful Conviction with, the Innocence Project's podcast or something like that. And she was saying, wow, so that cop just, threatened that person and didn't Mirandize them and gave them the phone, called their mom to tell them that they were guilty. That's
Yeah.
happened before from an interrogation room.
Yeah. Not from
So
like a, yeah.
I don't know what type of person or what type of events would have to have to happen to somebody to make them think that it was a good idea.
I don't know. I imagine that Rosie questioned her a lot yesterday. I don't know how long she was on the stand. I imagine for the majority of the afternoon, right? So there's probably a lot more that um, that they could have asked her, and they probably did in her deposition. I think she had two. Cleveland, I just wanted to say I'm not qualified at all to talk about what happens when you get Haldol but don't need it. But I'm sure someone is. But just this morning, I was reading a little bit about some of the side effects. Rochelle, thank you. It was really sweet. Some of the side effects of, I mean, obviously discontinuation syndrome. If you abruptly stop taking any kind of psychotropic or cardiac medication, there's going to be health. You're going to have adverse effects from that. But Halidol, I mean, it's a really old drug. It's a really good drug when it's needed and used appropriately. I know it works really well for psychosis, but you can also have adverse side effects to that. You can get, there's things like from certain SSRIs that everybody like takes. You can get serotonin syndrome. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can happen to a person when they are being prescribed medication, especially if they're receiving injections. I don't think we have enough information. I just know that if somebody's in acute psychosis, they probably need to be hospitalized, And the fact that they didn't hospitalize this man.
What type? Do they have hospitals? Do they have state hospitals?
You mean in DOC or just in general?
In general, in Indiana.
I suspect Indiana has a hospital or two, a state hospital or two.
Would there maybe be one in Cass County?
There might be one in Cass County.
Is
Yeah,
Logansport in Cass County?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And then I see a comment here real quick. Want to hit this one. Where you at? Peter B. Peter B. Listen, if we knew what happened today, you think we would be talking about this bullshit?
This bullshit. We're
No.
waiting for Courtney to text us her notes and to let us know that she's out. Yeah.
Yes, Logan is in Cass County. Well, if Logansport is in Cass County, is Logansport State Hospital in Cass County? I mean, that would make sense, I think.
So I saw in the notes, and I didn't know this. This is a rumor that we've heard forever, but of course it's taken different forms. That Rick Allen was hospitalized in 2019 for depression. Is that what I read correctly?
I think that's been alleged, yes.
Okay. It's in the notes though from yesterday.
Yeah, I think Dr. Walla was going over that as part of his medical history background.
History? Okay. I'm so sorry, Sleuthy. We don't have an update yet though. We're just talking.
Okay, that's it. I'm doing a ticker, guys.
Do a ticker. So hospitalization for major depression is like not novel. It's not unusual. It's not abnormal. A lot of things we've heard is like, oh, he was hospitalized for, oh, I don't know. We've heard a lot of crazy rumors, but we don't need to like moralize or assign any meaning to somebody being hospitalized for depression. It happens all the time, but it sounds like he was hospitalized for, he needed help and he got it. So if he's asking while he's in DOC in extreme distress, asking to go to Logansport to the hospital, to me that says he knew that he needed help and he was asking for it and he didn't get it, and that really fucking sucks. That makes me really mad.
Yeah, I mean, it's not good.
It's not good. You're here on time. You're here on time when we have nothing new to report. Hi, Travis. Thank you for that. That's helpful. If anyone's out there researching.
Are you able at all to talk about?
Yeah.
Actually, let me preface this a little bit.
Okay.
So there has been some speculation that we have a defense actor that was on here yesterday that left early to report on the most salacious defense topics yesterday about how there was no bad information about Rick Allen. Apparently, Yellow Jacket left just in time to miss out on the murder weapon being disclosed.
Oh my God.
And the destruction of the murder weapon. I just wanted to go over that claim really quick. We did ask Yellow Jacket if she was working to spin a narrative about that yesterday. She did disclose that Bob did tell her to leave and hurry up and go run and tell everybody what happened before the latest testimony came out.
Yeah.
But the idea to me that a box cutter could be used, and I have not seen any leaks. I don't want to see any leaks.
Wow.
Well, I'm not.
Wow.
And I'm not saying, but I'm saying most people would say this based off what they've seen in pictures.
Right. But you're like a totally unbiased, coming into
it. I'm biased as fuck. Don't get me wrong. I ride defense at all times.
Okay.
But to think that a box cutter could do the type of damage, or that it would even be a weapon like this, there's just a number of issues, that I have with it, and we'll have to get some more information about that. Ronick asked, did Nick confirm autopsy claimed box cutter? Did he? That would be interesting.
That's interesting. That would be really interesting, considering for 7 years we've never ever heard box cutter. We've heard everything but box cutter.
Well, I wanted to go over that to go over this. Have you ever heard of a wound specialist? A wound pattern analysis specialist?
I've heard of this mysterious, like your banner.
Forensic science.
Yeah, this pseudo nonsense of forensic science. No, I've heard of a wound pattern specialist. Yeah. Go on.
Well, so do you think there was any law enforcement early on that wanted to see if there was any type of anecdotal information or just common sense observation from a professional who has seen a ton of knife or sharp force wounds that could differentiate or rule out specific types of wounds or
Yeah,
specific types of instruments that cause the wounds.
I think that crank Mike Thomas early on, then Major Mike Thomas, the second in command with the Carroll County Sheriff's Department, did have a conversation with then prosecutor Robert Ives, and Robert Ives and him discussed the need for and the benefit of consulting with a wound pattern analysis weapons specialist. I don't know if those are the same person or two different people, but both of those things were discussed. And when Mike Thomas approached the task force, high-tech, Holman and Hammond specifically, as Holman was the lead detective early on for the Carroll County Sheriff's Department, and Holman was the ISP detective leading the case. They told him to buzz off and mind his beeswax, and they did not end up obtaining one, at least not early on that we know of. So that's very odd to me. I wonder why they wouldn't do that, considering that both the very, very experienced prosecutor and the very, very experienced major with the Sheriff's Department with like 20 plus years of law enforcement experience at that time thought that would be a really good idea. So I don't know why they wouldn't do that. Wouldn't you want to know what kind of weapon was used to kill your homicide victims?
Yeah, and I see this comment here about it being junk science, and I will say I agree. It is junk science to be presented in court, but we know that the state has no problem using junk science in investigations,
Right.
such as polygraphs, statement analysis, just a number of different things that they're not going to be able to bring into trial, but they can use it as an investigative technique. And I think talking to somebody, not necessarily using that as a method of proving the case, but an investigative tool to think, is this a specialized weapon? And, there's certain things that are obviously not caused by certain types of weapons.
Right.
A serrated blade may look different based off of
Yeah.
how it's used.
Yeah.
So,
Well, is it junk science? I feel like it is junk science. I don't even know what that means. I think it just means that like it's not, you can't replicate. I
there's a
don't know.
spectrum. There's a spectrum. Junk
Right.
science generally is something that can be repeatable
Right.
to
You
a
can
certain
replicate.
degree, but it's not scientifically validated in a double-blind peer review study.
Right.
So when you look at something like M's mentioned, unspent round,
Right.
when it comes to tool mark identification for firearms, in particular unspent rounds, there is no study whatsoever that exists that has a single point comparison study of an unspent round saying that there's any degree of scientific certainty, and they would never, it just wouldn't exist. And the reason it doesn't have to exist is because that's not how courts rule whether or not a science is allowed to be used as core as such.
Right. Right. So I would imagine that to a degree, like much like, actually, I imagine that a wound specialist has a little more scientific validity than something like profiling, right?
I mean, everything has more scientific validity than profiling.
Okay, fair enough. But I think that like you could certainly look at a wound and determine or at least exclude or reasonably hypothesize what like family of weapons the wound like caused the wound, right? So if you've got like a deep puncture wound, you could probably be like, oh, it's more likely to be like a knife, like a fixed blade than like a box cutter, for example, right? If someone is
Sure,
stabbed and they have a deep wound, like that would look more like a wound that was caused, for example, by a knife than a box cutter. Is that like probably a fair statement? I have no idea.
Yeah, with that type of pattern, like you would expect a puncture wound to
Yeah.
have some type of sharp, pointy object that's strong enough.
Right.
But with a box cutter, it would be more of a slice.
Right.
And if it was a very deep slice, you would imagine that it would take multiple passes,
Right.
and that they are so sharp and short that any type of struggle, you'll find quite a large amount of defensive wounds in other cases.
Yeah.
And we're talking about sometimes superficial defensive wounds.
Yep.
So I don't think that that's a very strong way of thinking about it. So this Travis comment I wanted to go over real quick.
Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so he's quoting here, I followed up and confirmed with CVS. They, in fact, issued a box cutter to Mr. Allen. So I don't know if you're being sarcastic, but I think there was a quote that Holman said that they did sell them there. And he did use, I think another quote was, I took the box cutter from work. Well, did you steal a product from work, or did you steal a tool from work and then use it? Because if it's a product, I mean, CVS is going to sell like a little small kind of cheap tool, whereas the tool that they would actually use at work is probably a large industrial U-line type utility knife that has a blade that moves but is locked into place pretty strongly.
Right.
It's like, would you take that very large utility knife with you? Would you take it home with you? Probably not. I mean, it's not made to fit in your pocket like a small pocket box cutter would. But you're then talking about how, you're talking about how a small folding, compact, everyday carry type of box cutter would be used for a crime like this. It just doesn't quite make sense.
He's a pharmacy technician, not store manager, but like I imagine he's opening boxes and fucking going through shit, like the things that you do when you work in a retail store. So
yeah,
like,
and maybe he doesn't do it every day, but one of those knives, a box cutter could be back there.
right.
But when you have workers that are retail workers, you're not going to give them a tiny little box cutter, right?
Sorry.
So in the dumpsters at CVS, there might be a graveyard of box cutters, just like in the police department, there might be a graveyard of interchangeable six-solid retired matching a specific bullet. Right? Oh wow, Rachel. Rachel is really smart. Wow,
I know.
that is impressive.
I know.
I actually just put two and two together, I think. But yeah, those SIGs, man, law enforcement love them. So additionally, the issue that Rachel brings up is another thing that makes me go, is where did he put this box cutter?
Right.
The blade or this murder weapon.
Right.
He put it at his work.
Right.
Which is in the middle of a very small town, which happens to be close to the gas station where everybody goes to fuel up, close to the McDonald's where everybody, there's only a fast food restaurant in town, I think.
Yeah.
And it just so happens to be right across the street from the police department.
Makes perfect sense.
If there's a murder, a homicide that occurs in a small town, they do a video canvas. They're going to video canvas for everything, cars, where they're at, where they're going. Maybe they didn't do a great video canvas, but you think they would take the video canvas from all security, from downtown buildings, to see cars going in and out, which directions they were going, who was doing what. You have public garbage, publicly accessible garbage. If there's you got to look in the garbage. Maybe he washed it, but there's questions about this story. And it's not something that I go, oh, okay, this completely makes sense. And when you think about the Wabash Church, it's like, well, wouldn't you just throw a metal object in a river or something like that? Would be much more suitable than the work dumpster?
Right. Or in the creek that's literally right there. I mean, like, it doesn't make any sense. doesn't make any sense.
I agree.
Or maybe a transfer station, a dump, somewhere where you're not gonna.
Don't even go there. Don't even try this transfer station nonsense.
It's right there.
I'll make an intro right now.
Do it. Okay. Well, what I was thinking yesterday. So, what we know about psychosis, very like layman's terms, psychosis is a state where, okay, you're pulling when someone's in psychosis, it's normal for them to pull from subconsciously. It's not like a conscious act, but your brain pulls from reality, things you know, and from delusion, things that are not real. So it's normal for a person to, when they're in psychosis, like let's say he says, I took a box cutter from work and I threw it in the trash at CVS or something. Like,
it's a forensic countermeasure.
yeah, of course.
Well, if you're getting rid of the evidence, that doesn't scream psychosis to me.
Exactly, it doesn't. And also, like, okay, he knows that. Oh, I work at CVS. That's a familiar thing to somebody who's worked there for years. That's familiar. That's reality, right? Throwing a murder weapon away at the place where you work is a psychotic. It's like a crazy thing to do, right? So like we're seeing this like fusion of reality and psychosis. Like that's a really kind of disorganized psychotic thing to do, to kill somebody and then to get rid of the murder weapon at your place of work, which would immediately link you. It's not a reasonable thing for somebody to do. It's like it's a psychotic thing to say, and that is those are the kinds of things that we expect to hear from somebody in psychosis. You're hearing people all day, every day, screaming at you, taunting you, harassing you about how you're a murderer and a baby killer and all the other shit that are screaming at him 24/7. Like, how many other confessions?
Let's separate. I know what you're saying. You're not talking about the psychosis necessarily in the facility. You're saying that some people have alleged that he just went crazy one day, right? And you're saying that he could have been in psychosis when he did this, and then later also had experienced psychosis in prison.
No, that's not. I'm not meaning to say that, if that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, like,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, just like, let's say that he tells somebody, I threw the box cutter away at work. That is the kind of utterance that somebody like in psychosis or delusion would say, because it's outrageous, right? Even if he like that doesn't mean that that's what he did. It just means that he's pulling from both his real life, oh, I worked at CVS, and this kind of delusional psychotic state that he's in. So you're fusing real and fake details together subconsciously.
Yes, Holman would say this is realistic.
This is realistic, certainly. Fucking Holman. I want to talk about Holman in a little bit too, by the way.
He was not on lunch break. I think the story is that he went home afterwards, but now maybe he stopped by to discard his weapon. I don't know. As soon as I start explaining one point that doesn't make sense, there's like 6 points that pop up in my head. So I just
we got time.
Oh, I don't have time.
So how many confessions are they saying he made? 60 something.
I think they said 60 plus 1.
60 plus 1 confessions. And this is the best one that he's made, a box cutter.
Yeah.
Like, it's stupid to me. It's just ridiculous. That's not something that only the killer would know. And I want to know when he got his discovery, when this confession about the box cutter was made, how much of the details of the case did he know by then? Also, companions and guards and inmates are talking to this man all day, every day. You really don't think that somebody could have contaminated that confession? You know what I'm saying? Like, at this point, a confession that only the killer would know doesn't exist anymore, because that shit only flies before you arrest a person, in my opinion. Because as soon as you get surrounded by law enforcement and DOC and inmates, you're contaminated. I don't give a shit if he said I don't give a shit if he did confess something that only the killer would know. I don't fucking care, because he's been in DOC for 1.5 years around a bunch of blabbing guards and inmates who God knows what they were feeding him. Like, Sorry, that's not going to work. I'd like
No.
to see a piece of evidence, like one piece of evidence, please.
And Gwen in here has a great point. If that's how you say your name, I'm sorry. Just roast me if it's wrong. I just looked at what they took from his home. A lot of knives, no box cutter, no utility knife. And
Well,
I don't even know if the prosecution is saying this is the method, right? I just know that Harshman was listening to some of the conversations that Mr. Allen was having while he's incarcerated. And this is something that he mentioned, is that he used a box cutter and threw it away at work. That's my understanding right now. I don't know if this is the state's theory, but yeah, I mean, they didn't take or search, and for a search warrant, I mean, you could say a knife, right? But you'd also wonder if they're going to be more specific than that. I would say probably not. They could probably say a knife, but it is strange. Did Holman say RA said this before arrest or after? This was not part of Holman's testimony. This was part of Harshman's testimony, I believe. And it was post-arrest. He was in prison when he said this.
Yeah. Yeah, and he had been in prison for months at this point, right? Because his first confession didn't happen until April. It's 1:30, DB. Where are they? I hope they're okay.
I don't know.
Did anyone else see the Columbo box cutter episode? DB, that sounds like that's all you. What does that mean?
I'll do whatever Rachel wants me to do.
Have you ever seen this Columbo episode?
No, but I have heard of Jerry Holman, and I do think that Columbo might be kind of a similar character. Actually, no, I actually think Columbo was just a fake buffoon, and that's how he did it. But yeah, I think actually a real buffoon is kind of a bad comparison. Holman claimed, however, on the stand that RA said something. Okay, well, that's excellent, Mr. Holman, in that interview, but made him know he was the killer, but didn't say what it was. Well, he also said he knew he was the killer on June 26th, or October 26th, sorry.
2022.
October 26th.
Yeah, well,
and
actually,
he was going to prove it.
He said, I know you did
Go ahead.
something.
No, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Don't point your glasses at the audience, please.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I know that you did something, is what he said.
Courtney.
I know that you're the killer. He just said, I know that you did something.
Courtney.
What?
Where are you, Courtney? Fiend, come up here.
Are you bored? Come up here, Fiend. I'm boring our guest. Where's Fiend? I'm gonna
Susan says Susan Hendricks claimed that Ari glared at her.
Yeah.
The Patties. Yeah, Susan, it's over. You're done. You cannot be whatever. It's over, dude. She said that. I'm not shitting you. She said.
Sucks.
You said what?
I said she sucks. Fiend, I'm sending you a link because
yeah, Captain Jack has to go get back on the pirate ship.
Okay.
So she said that. Well, Nancy Grace said this. She was keying with Nancy Grace, and she said that there's no way that Richard Allen is telling the truth because in the video of Bridge Guy, he's not looking down at a stock ticker on his phone.
That's so stupid.
Ma'am.
I don't even know what to say to that.
Disgusting. What's Columbo? Columbo was like an old timey. I don't want to say old timey. That makes me sound really young. Wasn't that old timey, but he was like a bumbling goofball that always kind of, oh, mister, I don't know what's going on with this case. You tell me what's up. He just kind of played a dummy cop, a dummy investigator, so people wouldn't take him serious. And then all of a sudden, he would go freaking what's the guy from True Detective? Rust. Detective Rust on ya. Yeah, see that comment right there by Susan. It's like, well, he also said that no matter what, he was going to find out something. Holman said that. Oh, thank God, dude.
I'm here for the Columbo discussion.
Speaking of Columbo, here we go.
I love Columbo. My mom loved Columbo. Like
And no matter
watched this as a kid all the time.
no matter how much we neg each other, we're good friends, okay? Me, Fiend and I. We just got the vibes, dude. So don't feel bad for Fiend. He could take it.
Hi, Hoosier.
Yeah. Here we go.
Okay. Absolutely. I don't make promises that I can't keep. And the only promise I can make is we're going to put forth every effort and we're going to utilize every resource that's available. But we're going to catch this person or persons. We're going to catch this monster. Whoever did this needs to be put away, and we're not going to stop until we find out and find this person and make this person accountable for his actions.
You could say that.
Promises that I can't keep.
He doesn't make promises he can't keep. And what promise did he make to one Richard Allen October 10th or October 26th? Okay, I'm done. I gotta go. Bye. Try to get cute. I messed it up 3 times. I'm done. Bye.
Fiend,
Yes.
what do you think?
About what specifically?
All the things.
I think a lot of this is a stretch. I think that I agree with what you're saying as far as the validity of confessions and the circumstances that confessions are coming out, and I'm still not sure that we've even heard like really specifically like. I mean, I think the incriminating statements is the preferred phrase rather than confessions.
Okay. I agree. Incriminating statements.
Because like a lot of time when you think about a confession, you know, the cops will want to get like a written confession. Write your statement. Write everything down that happened, and you know they got like
tell your wife on the phone that it's recorded.
Oh man, yeah, the dialing the phone thing is troubling a lot.
I don't love that. I don't love that at all.
Oh, I don't love that.
Well, in the confession too, Kate put something in the chat before. Like when I think of a confession, you think of like BTK in court confessing. Like he's talking about details. He details. You know what I mean? It's like an hour long. That's not what this is. These are just statements that are vague and contradictory and psychotic. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of it leans towards like, okay, like we get that he was acting crazy and being crazy and saying crazy things. Like that just kind of seems to encompass these statements as well. I feel like putting a ton of weight on them is like a huge leap.
Yeah. I agree. I definitely agree. And I don't think we even have a timeline, right? Just Jerry Holman.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anybody's timeline, like, you know, except for like, I mean, you know, you've got multiple search warrants and probable cause affidavit that kind of like conflict quite a lot as far as even when Abby and Libby got there and what their timeline was. And,
right.
you know, it isn't a very long period of time, you know, supposedly, but like we don't know, like about the only thing we know is like, you know, that they got dropped off within like this, you know, they shifted that time that they got dropped off by like an hour, but so that's
Yeah, it's kind of like
not completely clear, but that's about the only thing that we actually know about anybody's timeline. I have zero idea what Richard Allen's timeline was for like what he did that day. I haven't ever seen anything like that.
Yeah, me either. Can the defense get up there and read all 67 statements, not just pick and choose?
Yeah, the picking and choosing thing is something I was a little bit unclear on because I saw it come up a couple times. The prosecution didn't want they wanted some of the statements to not be included, which that seems problematic. Like you're just gonna sift through them and then you don't want the jury to be able to hear the other things that he said which don't match up.
Yeah.
That seems bad. Like I think you need to take the whole thing in context. The you know, if there's some reason a statement can't be included because, you know, it violates some sort of, you know, process or
Alert.
constitutional right,
Alert.
or like it was coerced or whatever,
Alert.
like that can be suppressed. But I don't think the prosecution just be like, no, you can't. You
Ears.
can't. Go ahead.
Ears. Hey, I just wanted to interrupt. I'm sorry, bringing this update to you here quickly. Yellow Jacket is out of court and going to be sending the notes soon, and so I will compile and send them over.
There we go.
Please continue. I'm sorry.
DB broke my concentration.
That son of a bitch, Fiend. I'm so sorry about that.
It was a good update though. Like I think that's what people actually want to know is where's Yellow Jacket?
She's coming. She's getting situated. She just said 30-minute recess. Oops. Yeah.
I'm kind of shocked that they're just getting so much work done. And like, you know, we've had so little court time in this entire case. And like, they're finally getting to something and doing like 3 days of hearings. Like, what? Like, it's shocking. Like, I can't believe it's actually happening, that they're actually in court and doing things.
Yeah. I'm frozen.
Taking over yet another channel. Where's DB at? He usually helps me with this.
Hello there.
There he is.
I'm in the middle of a thing and another thing.
Yeah.
We're trying to get the notes right now. Signaling. There's probably geofence in Delphi right now. They probably got a stinger and a couple RF detectors.
Right. There's a geofence warrant like over the courthouse. So good luck to y'all. DB, do you know, like, I think I've heard this as a question, like, can they, like, people that, can they, like, do, like, a check-in list for, like, people going into a courtroom?
Actually, you know, they can, if they
Can
really
they?
wanted
Okay.
to. They could ask you, but in federal court, they'll just get your ID. That you have to, well, I don't know about every federal court, but most of them that I've been into, they take your ID from you. They scan it through the system.
Kind of seems like a deterrent from, like, having
you
a
think?
public public access. A
Yeah,
little bit.
like if you're maybe if you're not, maybe you don't have a driver's license or a state issued ID, there's that. But also if you have a warrant, you may be scared, or maybe, there's some communities that don't like interacting with the government or police at all.
Right. You might just be private and don't want to give your information to the government.
From my understanding, however, these are open, because I had the same question, because I wasn't gonna go if they were gonna take my name. I mean, it's DB Cooper, but I mean,
Right.
I'm not giving that up.
I mean, I don't think I'd have the same concern, but I just think it would be weird. And I just thought that, I don't know. I was just wondering if they are actually allowed to monitor something like that, because it seems to be a little bit questionable.
Yeah. Also, something else to consider. I mean, if it was real nefarious, I wouldn't park my personal vehicle anywhere near there, just because people might be running around checking who's there by what's in the parking lot. Yellowjack has about 20 pages. She's loading them right now.
I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that, because that is exactly what happened to me the last time I went to a hearing. Is that somebody ID'd my vehicle?
Yeah, that's messed up. And yeah, it is a public place, but just
Sorry. I'm back. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Is this end stream button? What does this do?
Don't hit that button.
Okay. An Israel Keys mentioned here. Yes. I have some thoughts about that person in this case. Obviously, I don't think he's connected, but I think the archetype that I think could do something like this would be somebody like that.
I mean, it is interesting that he had family in Indiana and traveled to Indiana, right?
Well, when you're, right-wing Mormon militia and part of the church and all kinds of crazy places, I mean, everyone's your family.
I mean, actual family. I believe it was, let's say, Goshen or something, maybe.
Goshen Straight Blast or whatever it's called. What's up? Straight away Goshen? You think he's a black Israelite is what you're saying?
I have a feeling DB is not from Indiana. I haven't mentioned anything from Indiana. He's just goes
You
off
think so?
wild tangent.
You really figured that one out, huh?
Right. I'm a regular Columbo, buddy.
Okay, that's nice. Oh, dude.
It's a struggle here.
Yep, Travis says deterrent. Yep, deterrent if you have a warrant. In federal court, about only time they want all IDs is cartel cases, terrorism, organized crime. If only thing is run of a mill, they don't typically take IDs.
Right.
Okay.
I think that it's just whether they even have the ability to do it is a little bit concerning. Not whether
Yeah.
they exercise it. They probably shouldn't. I mean, it feels like it's something that should be a pretty open access.
Yeah. Those cartel cases.
Did we see Sleuthy's update? Should we check the Twitter?
Yeah. I'll look at it. I don't have time to pull it up. I really do have to go. I'm gonna go right after this. Where's Sleuthy Goosey? She's on Twitter. Sleuthy. There she is. Christina Rex? No, that's old. That's old. That's old. I see some Barbara McDonald goofing. That's it. No update. Look at my last comment. No, I wrote it in there. Can you just tell us what it was in here?
Look at my last comment. The last comment was, no, I wrote it in here.
Okay, well, I really do have to get going. Thanks, Fiend. Good luck with this channel. as
Right,
well.
thanks.
Yeah.
The Phoenix takeover. We'll probably just be reading comments here. I don't have any ability to highlight comments. Oh, there's backup.
Keep getting booted from my own stream. So let's see.
Susan Skinner says, yes, all these that claim, quote, he said he was there, unquote, drive me nuts. I used to live there. People are helpful. They asked who was there, and he said he was there. Yeah, it's a bombshell that, you know.
Sleuthy, do you want to update us, or you want me to just throw these up? Let's see.
Sleuthy says they called the subject matter / atypical crime scene expert. That's who's been testifying all morning. She's convinced crime scene was ritualistic. Click and Murphy are there. Exclamation points. I mean, it seems weird that there's such like contention of whether there's like, I mean, I feel like they could probably figure it out, whether there are like ritualistic aspects and like strange things at this crime scene. Like, doesn't seem to be a huge mystery on that, but like they seems like they really don't want it to be ritualistic and strange. Probably because that, you know, I don't think that they've tied Richard down to any ritualistic and strange things. I'd guess that they'd be quick to change their minds if they could tie him to ritualistic and strange things. Wouldn't you think? And yes, the serrated knife is not the same thing as a box cutter. It's like the exact opposite of a box cutter, which is just basically, box cutter is just a razor blade in a device, like what you would use to shave your face. Mothman, I think you're muted.
I know, I just muted myself. Per autopsy report, no time of death and serrated blade.
Well, that's some information that we've probably never really gotten firmed up until now then.
Hey, I'm gonna turn my camera off so I can pull these notes from Courtney. Fiend, I'll be right back. You are free to keep reading or whatever you want to do, but I will be right back.
My StreamYard audio's breaking up a little bit. Yeah, so like that's new information, although it's kind of like new not information, because no time of death is like, that's not information. Like, wouldn't we want to know the time of death? Like, I'm not really sure like where this information is, like, or where this investigation, like, it just doesn't seem to be very like diligent in getting some basic pieces of information. Like, I don't know how they were going to prosecute this crime against anybody if they don't have like some basic pieces of information, like time of death. Got a lot of comments here. KO says, oh, can I just see that? I don't know if I can do that. No.
Jerry Holman yesterday said time of death was based off cell phone coverage or cell phone connection, not
Right. And that's
stomach
not like,
contents, not temperature, not rigor mortis, not liver
yeah,
mortis.
it's not the most scientific way to determine time of death. And he didn't say time of death. He said the murders occurred.
Yeah, well, there's no time of death.
Right. So we don't have time of death. Maybe think the murders specifically occurred within 1 hour period, which seems, I'm not sure what backs that up a whole lot. Peter B says, will the Odin defense be allowed? And I don't know. Based on what Sleuthy says, who was testifying all morning, like, I'm not even sure that they're getting into all this motion and limine stuff, are they? Like, they're running out of time. Like, that seems like a lengthy hearing by itself, and they haven't gotten to it. So I don't know that they're even going to figure out. I don't know that we're going to get that far. It's almost like they should have scheduled additional days of hearings. Although I did hear early on that maybe this would like go into a fourth day. So maybe they'll have a.
I think this is the state's motion to eliminate, which they're trying to prove the nexus for.
Okay. Well, that'd be interesting. Bill says if no time of death, that kind of throws out the state's timeline. I mean, yeah, I go with what Cleveland says. That makes no timeline at all. Like, yeah, we don't there is no timeline. Like, the time of death would be crucial for that. Susan says, Nick wants it out, but defense has to prove that they have and get what they have and get foundation in to prove they shouldn't eliminate it. The Royal We says, you're definitely not narrowing down to a 1 hour time period based on stomach contents alone. Yeah, and I don't know that we've heard that they've even attempted to do anything scientific as far as determining the time of death. They seem to be pretty content to just go off of that last scene, last photograph, and then they're gone. So that's when the murder happened. That's not a great way to determine anything. So yeah, yesterday I did a tweet about kind of about Brad Holder's timeline that kind of came to light a little bit more. It made me think about something like really, really early like rumblings of which are rumors are just rumors, but like there was something to it as far as when they were doing the search, like initially right away, there was some report that the girls had been at a local gym, or they were reported as being seen at a local gym. And like, then there was nothing more to that. Like, I don't know. They obviously didn't find them anywhere, but it's just really interesting that gym part even exists. Like, as an idea that they may have been somewhere not on the trails that day. I'll have to dig that up. Cleveland says they never requested video from his employer. Travis says no time of death puts Holder and Fields in play now, question mark. All eyes on Delphi says no time of death ultimately helps no one when so many people think the only way to acknowledge RA's innocence is for the defense to meet the state's burden of solving the crime and proving it. Yeah, I mean, I think I think there's a lot of hope that, that if this crime isn't solved, by the state, that it'll be solved by the defense team. But like, it's definitely not their job, and their entire job is, you know, avoiding a conviction, um, or working towards an acquittal, and they're able, to do that with reasonable doubt alone. They may want to go further. They certainly have more access to information than anybody. And you would think that, like, with access to all this evidence and all this discovery material, that, like, that you would be able to figure it out just based on that alone, potentially. Maybe not. It doesn't help when some of the evidence has been destroyed, and you got tons of interviews that were just deleted, and no logs of who you interviewed even, and no transcripts for those interviews. So there does seem to be like some spoily, I can't say the word. Just said spoiling of the evidence of, which would be a hindrance for actually solving the crime just based on what information they actually currently have. Like, you can't do anything if you don't actually have the evidence. Sleuthy says death certificate about say anything other than time and date they were found. Yeah, the death certificates have a lot of errors, or at least the versions that have been out in the public previously. I believe they were filtered through, it was data input into like an ancestry type thing, and there are, how much information can you trust on those when some of the information is certainly completely incorrect? I think there's ways to kind of sleuth through that and figure out like which parts are valid and which parts aren't valid. Criminality says the death certificate states 4 p.m. and that would be a problem, for the timeline. That 2:30 to 3:30 window that Jerry Holman determines based on, we're not sure yet, versus 4 p.m. is, that's outside the window. It really, really messes up the timeline. Peter says the FBI were involved. No way was an autopsy done and no time of death. Yeah, I also really wonder about like what the heck is going on here, because the FBI, like we were told, like, the FBI was there immediately. Like, there was tons of FBI like on site, like in the area, like almost immediately. Like people said, more FBI agents than you'd ever seen before. And so, like, you would think that, like, the crime scene analysis and like the collection of evidence would have been really, really buttoned up. But, I think that's an assumption. And maybe the FBI was kind of like doing their own thing and local law enforcement was doing their own thing. There may have been other reasons that the FBI was like interested in what was happening, but not actually assisting completely. You would think they would, but we don't for sure know that. But we do know that they continue to have involvement. There was even an FBI guy that was on the Unified Command for a very, very long period of time. So you would really think that like this investigation like be pretty good as far as like, hey, you've got the FBI helping you all this way. And then of course they got rid of the FBI. So that it seems like maybe there was a conflict as far as thought processes. Well, we were told that there was going to be notes coming.
I am trying to figure out a quick way to share these. It's just taken me a minute, but they're coming, I promise. Okay. I think I can do it this way. This is not the ideal way, but I'm going to share my screen and we'll go through them that way. So, oops. Hmm. Golly, I'm so sorry, y'all.
Maybe I'm not here. Am I still on?
You're still on, Fiend. I'm just loading all of these into Adobe. It's just taking a minute, but I can still hear you.
Okay. All I says because there's so much information and the state keeps trying to gaslight everyone into thinking up is down and down is up. And yeah, it's I think that's one of the things about this case is that, like, you know, the state, rather than, you know, drilling down and just putting out some basic facts and information, like they seem to prefer everybody being confused and not having any information. So, you know, may be telling of as well as how they conducted the investigation. Susan says, just once, I would like to see a clean and clear investigation. I haven't seen one in a while. Rochelle says, and there's still the PSYOP theory. What's the PSYOP theory? Rochelle, put that in the chat. I want to hear about the PSYOP theory. All I says, speedy trial was part of the strategy. In September, they were going to file the Franks, then the motion for the discovery deadline, and then speedy trial. Yeah, and they got bushwhacked on that strategy. Oddly by the judge, which is not common. That the judge just tanks a whole defense strategy.
Does that work? That's probably really small, right?
It looks a little bit small.
Let's see. think that'll work for now.
Lucy said, just read them.
Okay, I'm just going to read them. So, page 1. That's not page 1. That's page 2. Oh, God. Jesus. Okay, hold on. All right, I'm just going to read them. And we will share them later because I don't want to keep everybody waiting. So, page 1, 9 a.m., State's motion in Limine. They're starting with unfinished business from Wednesday. So, a summation of the motion to suppress from Rosie recaps the amendments that are being violated, as well as the rights that they're violating of Rick's. Provided judge with a thumb drive of all of the incriminating statements and the statements that arose afterwards, such as, quote, they say that I confess, focuses from March to June 2023, maybe a stray in July. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
7 months before afforded a hearing. Okay, so he was shipped off without a hearing. The sheriff must show cause that he was in serious danger and a threat when he wasn't. He's held 200 miles from his attorney, family, and courthouse. It's an extremely solitary situation, and there's no evidence prior to April 2023 that he was ever even suicidal. So there is no doubt he was suffering from serious mental illness. This is 12 times the length of solitary confinement from what the policy states they're allowed. It's a long time. From April to June, this is page 2. April to June, the health team at Westfield did find that he was in a psychotic episode, which is exactly when the statements arose too, from April to June. He urges judge to read page 122 to 126 from a report provided from Westcott about her findings. Major depression with psychosis is the diagnosis, multifactorial chronic depressive disorder. Rick had one line of communication to his family. The statements to and from through a state-owned phone and monitored 24/7. It violates his fundamental right to privacy. Phone monitoring is classic investigative tool, but Rick's situation was not classic. Companions were gossiping while Rick endured these conditions. The chaplain's statement seems irrelevant because they can't find anything that the state sees as incriminating. Walla, Dr. Walla is a long arm of the state and the Department of Correction. He brought up the lack of disclosure regarding the patient-doctor privilege and the exception. Instead, they consistently made Rick feel like he had an advocate with during the cage sessions, which is when Walla would sit outside of his cell. The best evidence of what he was communicating to Walla for 13 months was destroyed. Walla ran afoul of multiple ethical violations that conduct alone shows she was not acting as his psychiatrist, but rather a friend or associate or someone trying to excitedly learn a lot about the case. Brings up a case of Indiana Protective Advocacy Services versus the Indiana Department of Corrections, and we can share that case later. Most cases out there deal with the Fifth and Sixth Amendment issues. Federal law says that they must prove bad acts caused a false confession, and that's not the case in Indiana. Indiana just has a totality standard, meaning there's an evaluation of how these types of issues have been handled in the... Oh, sorry. They're trying. Okay, so an evaluation of how these types of issues have been handled in cases, quote, trying to crack someone, end quote, is what Rosie says. Solitary confinement became part of an unacceptable policy of interrogation practices. The state claims that there was no interrogation, but Rosie agrees to an extent. He references, quote, the Messiah case, end quote. There's a sophisticated system of surveillance grounded in a due process violation. The system in place before Rick arrived at Westville to monitor his every move. Okay, so they had a system in place before Rick arrived at Westville in order to monitor his every move. He tells Gull, you don't have to weigh this out. Another judge did it for you. Judge Pratt allegedly did it in Indiana IPAS versus IDOC, which we will share. Diener, Stacy Deer, in summation retorts, we believe that the motion fails to state a basic grounding in law. The state has the burden to prove the statements made were not in violation of due process of the Fifth or Sixth Amendment. Details that everyone just was following DOC procedure and nobody interrogated Rick. He had, quote, lots of connection and interactions. His rights were protected. He made the choice to make these statements. In April, he decided to start confessing. Walla advised him not to do that, and the state believes they've proven that the statements were voluntary. That's her whole argument. Courtney titles this page, Diener Losing It Continued. The warden is at the mercy of the safekeeping order, per Diener, just doing what they were told to do. It's been long established that jail phone lines are monitored. Rick's circumstances are designed to keep him safe. He caused his own deterioration by choosing not to eat and sleep. And then in quotations, Courtney says, oh my fucking God, my face right now. Because, yeah. So that's Stacy Deer alleging that Rick caused his own deterioration by choosing not to eat and sleep. Got it. Okay, I'm assuming this is a quote. Quote, he wants to die, but too coward to kill himself and also doesn't want to go to hell. Okay. And then Courtney starred this. The state believes that Alan's motivation to make these statements is that, quote, Alan found God on March 21st, 2023, and wanted to share that with everyone. He wanted to make things right and give his Bible to his to the family of Abby and Libby. He's in a position of consequence for his actions and is remorseful. His environment was burgeoning him was something his healing, end quote. And then in parentheses, Courtney says, Stacy girl, what is you doing? Yeah, that's insane. I can't wait to hear what Courtney has to say about this later, but this is all Stacy Deer's theory. The state believes his motivation is that he found God and he wants to confess. Soon after, he's covered in feces and still refusing his Haldol injection, per Stacy Deer. Walla has statements from April 2nd to April 10th. Courtney then puts in parentheses, oh my fucking God, please go back and look at her notes timeline. More on May 3rd and May 10th, and she said, quote, he's stabilizing. Courtney's probably losing it at this moment because her handwriting's getting really crazy and erratic. But, okay. Deer Wild and Continued is the title of this page. He was put, this is quote from Deer, he was put in safekeeping for dire risks to his safety, and obviously the sheriff had a reason for doing that. Asks the court to find Alan made voluntary choice to make these incriminating statements, and the treatment's been consistent for 13 months. So why was he just psychotic in April to June? She says, quote, major depressive disorder and anxiety are not serious mental illness. Quote, he wasn't psychotic, end quote. He just wanted to make things right, end quote. He wanted to confess to God, and when that didn't yield the reaction he wanted, he stopped doing it, end quote. Gull thanks both of them for their
Angelo.
Yes.
I sent you updated notes.
Thank you, sir. I don't know what I was doing wrong. Thank you, DB. My hero, everyone's hero. Everyone give it up for DB. What a guy. What a guy.
He's okay.
He's just He's something. He is something else. Page 6. Okay. Gonna upload these. Thank you, Sleuthy. I just saw your comment. We got them finally, but I will also share them with you. This was stuff we heard yesterday. They were doing a recap this morning, I guess. Yes, Susan, that request should have come from Nick and not from the sheriff. You're correct. All right. So we just finished the recap. Now we're on to page 7, which is new information.
So I've got a question.
Go ahead.
Like, I'm just not following. Like, they're saying, like, oh, he doesn't have like a real major mental illness, but they're also giving him these shots that are like for psychosis, but he doesn't have psychosis. So, like, which is it? Like,
she diagnosed him with psychosis multiple times in her notes, so I'm not sure why Stacy Deer is saying that he didn't have it. Yeah, I don't know, Fiend. That's a good question. Because the actual psychologist diagnosed him with psychosis, and his behavior certainly indicates that he was psychotic. Just because he also has a diagnosis of major depression, you can become psychotic if you have major depression and you are experiencing extreme duress like this. It's not novel, you know.
Right.
Correct, Scully. You're absolutely right. That's something that you see in psychosis. It's a psychotic symptom to be doing that. Okay. 10:25 a.m. The state's motion in Limine. Judge Gold asks if there's any objection to 1 through 6, as it's pretty standard practice. Rosie says these are covered by rules of professional conduct. Tell defense to follow the rules. Generally, the provision says things that are considered prejudicial to the defendant. Rosie's objection to 1 through 6, based on it being one-sided and forcing rules of professional conduct to defense only. Regarding Wadier, state appears to curtail conditioning and defense intends to follow rules. So they're going back and forth. Nick's based on prior acts of the defense. I felt it necessary to address this before they call me corrupt.
That's it's getting ahead of
Nick, get a hold of yourself, bro.
Oh man.
He argues 7 through 12 are the meat of his filing. Gold says, I run a tight ship at trial. I hold you to professional conduct. Paragraphs 1 through 6 and 10, granted and mutually applicable to both sides. Baldwin is requesting a separation of witnesses, and Gull enforces the separation order, and 5 witnesses go out. Good for Gull. That's the second separation of witnesses that she's done in these hearings. That is good. I like that, Mandy. They're going to say it anyway, Sleuthy. Yeah, I'll say it. I've been saying it. I'll keep saying it. Okay, Baldwin does the opening statement for this motion in limine hearing. Joyner v. State, I think that says, any relevancy showing someone else committed the crime means it's less probable that the defendant did it. They're calling Murphy, Click, Amber Holder as a fact witness, John, ? A crime scene expert. You will hear that law enforcement believed multiple people were involved, and our third-party suspects are multiple people. Tobe and Liggett believed that multiple people were involved due to the terrain and the short amount of time. Liggett only changed his mind after Rick arrested and they needed the one suspect theory. That matches, yeah. Oh, here. Let me just do this really quick. Don't go away. Click, click, click. I'm almost done. So sorry. Okay.
I'm curious whether they get to all of the elements in the motion in Limine, or if like some of them are kind of not really addressed as much.
Phoebe, can you watch the chat a little bit? Because I'm gonna pull this up so I can see a little better. Is that okay? I mean, if anyone has an emergency, you know. Okay. So they're gonna be calling Murphy Click Amber Holder, a crime scene expert, multiple people theory. Okay. The narrative from the start by law enforcement was that the crime occurred between 2:13 and 3:30 p.m. at the place the girls were found that was locked in by day 7. There was never any other consideration for the crime. You'll hear a lot about 4:33 a.m. until May 15th. Cecil didn't even know that Libby's phone turned on at 4:33 a.m. and connected. They never looked at anything on the 14th because it wasn't narrated, because that wasn't their narrative, so they didn't consider it. So they never looked at anything that happened after their supposed 3:30 p.m. Timeline ended. The Blotcher report and the Mullen report. Blotcher was a cell phone G. He analyzed the AT&T reports. The cell phone was either off or out of the tower range on the 13th around 5:30 p.m. It was not broken, and at 4:30 a.m. it was turned on and SMS something in. So text messages were flooded in. Text messages flooded in. Wow, that's significant. Baldwin opening continued. Down the hill occurred on the private drive. Down the hill is private drive. Hundreds of searches. Abby and Libby were found 200 yards from the bridge and nobody saw them. There's no time of death on the autopsy. The bodies were moved in stage and they were looking for people with connections to sticks and rooms, like looking at Logan. Quote, focus on pagan rituals, end quote, from the FBI. The behavioral analysis unit eventually determined this was not a ritual, but Dawn will say that they weren't using the proper methodology. Magical thinking differs from Western tradition. Okay. We will hear from Dawn, who is a subject matter expert paid for by the feds as an expert on atypical homicides related to rituals. Peer-reviewed sacrifice author, she is the G. Symbolic crimes, magical thinking, racially motivated extremism, and she teaches the FBI what to look for when they're looking at crime scenes. She will tell you that this crime scene is a textbook ritual sacrifice. Look at that. I love hearing experts' credentials. I got the goose pimples. This crime scene meant something to the person, end quote. He mentions Holder and says, we'll discuss. Libby's family is listening intently. There's no strong reaction yet. Nick and Pearl Nutter is the name of this. Oh, wait. Is that the right page? 8, 9. Nope, not yet. Okay, sorry. Here we go. Page 9. Wait, did you already? Where am I? Okay, 10. Amber Holder will tell us. Brad said that he and Pat Westphal got into a fight about a ritual by a river. Brad said Pat Westfall did it. Amber will tell us things that are not in Click's report, such as Brad cut his hand between his thumb and his forefinger and bled onto an altar. He did it to me too. Brad said that Pat Westfall wanted to move from animal sacrifice, and Brad had ceremonial knives. Quote, the state relies heavily on an alibi because their timeline is fabricated, end quote. Evidence shows the probability that the girls were not there at the time. So on 2/14, Brad posted that he was full of testosterone at the gym at 2 a.m. The deposition states the only time that he ever went to the gym was around 2 a.m. Messer stated that he and Brad have been something together. We'll talk about Elvis and how he confessed. Elvis was adamant in the deposition that Brad followed him with a question marks. He'll discuss why they should be allowed to speak about Ron Logan and Keegan Kline if they choose, as they have connections to the crime and the victims and were suspects. Nick goes on to say, quote, any evidence, end quote, isn't what the law says. He references the Lasbrook case where DNA was standard. Quote, there must be a direct material connection based on admissible evidence, not based on theory or hearsay. The court can consider alibis of those third parties as well as evidence against the defendant. You'll find that the state can debunk much of what Baldwin just said. Any person we investigated does not equal a third party. Defense calls Holman to the stand. I fucking love when the defense calls Holman to the stand. People are looking around. Where's Holman?
Again?
Oh my God. People are looking around. Where is he? His chair was right outside. They are trying to locate Holman. They decide instead to call Dawn Perlnutter. She's the director of Central Intelligence Group. It's a PA medical group in forensics. They're going through her resume. Courtney says to look it up, which we can do. Chapter in a book dealing with blood sacrifice. She wrote field guides for law enforcement and crime scene investigators. She has over 20 years of analyzing ritualistic homicides and crime scene investigations. Man. Sorry. That made me laugh. Oh my God. Okay. So this woman's like a G in ritualistic sacrifice. She and Gull have chairs slightly rotated towards each other, and she speaks directly to Gull, and Gull is looking directly at her. This woman, Perlnutter, she has 3 advanced degrees. Art and art history, very relevant to to subject matter expert, doctorate in arts and humanities from NYU, and anthropology. Damn. She looks for identifiers at scenes. She does case consulting, training. She testified at 3 homicide cases and at various others, and she has only testified for a defense once. Interesting. Symbolism can be tattoos, insignias, dates, etc. Norse paganism and Odinism fall under white supremacy and extremist umbrella. She's very familiar with it, but she wouldn't call herself an Odin expert per se, not exclusively. Norse paganism is a huge category. There's many nonviolent. Many are nonviolent. Asatru, heathenism, etc. can all be different. They're organized into kindreds. There are some common ties, general common symbols or traditions like altars, outdoor ceremonies, etc. Symbolic anthropologic method. It focuses on culture versus behavior, which is what the BAU culture and ideology versus behavior and psychopathology. So that's how she differs from what the BAU does. Violence can be justified as a right or initiation versus a personality disorder. And behavioral psychopathology is a very Western way of thinking. Everything is explained by what's mentally wrong with a person, which I imagine she's saying that like falls short. DB. So how does law enforcement get it wrong? This is Pearl Nutter continued. Being viewed as a sexual sadist or a serial killer without including ideology into the profile. It's important to translate a code for how it's used at a scene. For how it's used at a scene. Magical thinking is how you get into mind of someone who would love symbols. Magical thinking is how you get into the mind of a person who would leave symbols at a scene. You can't use logic and psychology and rational Western thinking to altars and symbols at a scene. Prayer is a form of magical thinking. Norse paganism centered in doing these rituals will bring what you want in life like prayer will. Runes are ancient language and used as an identifier in Odinism. Blood rituals are thought to be very powerful. Blood is the highest offering. And many of these things are personal rituals symbolic to only them. Only the killer would blah, blah, blah. Sorry, that was my own applet. Identifiers. Place of death is indicative of ideology. Norse paganism always is outdoors in nature, often by a body of water. Date of death. Dates are significant. Moon phases, holidays, etc. Cause of death. Very significant. In rituals, often a lot of torture, blood loss, bones, and blood stabbing often. Weapon, ceremonial purpose. The object is important and becomes part of the ritual. Symbols, things hung in trees, carved, etc. She teaches law enforcement in outdoor scenes. They often use elements in nature to form symbols, like sticks, etc. Bodies, typical homicides, they're hidden, burned, fingers cut off with ritual body placement is everything. Body placement is everything. Blood of victim. There's many atypical things done. This is fascinating. What did you review for Delphi is the question. And Pearl Nutter says she reviewed crime scene pics, autopsy, bloodstain patterns, the BAU report, lots of social media, and police interviews. She concluded this is a textbook ritual murder and it has all of the indicators. Whoa. Delphi specific, place. A cleaning separates spaces, casting a circle to sanctify the space. A body of water is very common, quote, strong indicator. Number 2. How do you say that, Fiend? Vallus blot?
Say what?
Vallus blot? Vallus bloat? Vallus blot? Something blocked.
Bloat.
Bloat? Okay.
Yeah, blot is bloat.
Bloat. 2:14. Sun up to sundown, so it starts on the 13th. There's not a strong indication, but it's still an indicator. Cause of death. A slit throat is a sacrificial offering, and that's how it's usually done. They cut the throat and bleed out. Weapon. Shows her a picture of Brad Holder's altar, and she says it's very likely a ceremonial knife that would be used by a person who made this altar. Thank you, Sleepy. 5, symbolism. Branches are carefully placed. A person created a symbol, bind runes. She says that a bind rune on Brad's hand is identical to Abby. It's exactly the same. She also observed Brad Holder created stick runes in the woods prior to the homicide. I imagine observed meaning like on social media or whatever. Thank you, Travis. Pearl Nutter continued. So she was asked to look at Libby's body. She says that intentional, meaningful body might be a symbol to the offender. The pic on Brad holder's Facebook is identical to Libby or Abby, ? We're not sure. Bind runes, bodies. No counterforensic measures were taken with either. Interesting. Careful positioning natural objects on bodies. Delphi, the body position and the cause of death and symbols and placement in a clearing are classic identifiers of a ritual murder. Very strong classic identifiers of a ritual murder. Baldwin shows her the hanging man photo that Brad Holder made on 2/17/18. Nick objects. Did you look at the Facebook page? No. So you don't know where this came from? No. Judge, I just want to point out that this is from Facebook. Thank you. So then it tells her the positioning of Abby's legs are identical. The painting is a classic piece of art and imagery regarding, it could have meaning. Anniversaries are important. The ritual started in ideology, but then personalized. Okay, so they're talking about the painting Brad made still. Regarding the F tree, I'm not a blood spatter expert, but this absolutely appears to be an intentional marking. They use the tree as part of an offering. Regarding a video of a ritual with Brad Holder and Pat Westfall, outdoor near water, casting a circle using symbolism, runes in water, making offerings to a tree. Regarding the picture of an altar that Brad Holder liked, Reddit pic maybe. 2 weeks after the murders, there's runes in blood on a tree. Regarding the mimicked crime scene photo, Nick objects to the characterization, and it's sustained. She sees a depiction of two young women posed in a similar manner with tree branches on them. She said it is indicative of the crime scene. The state will allege that this was an undoing, staging out of remorse, regret, etc. Do you agree? They asked to the expert. No, no way. Redressing is an undoing behavior and typically done by family. There's no doubt in my mind that this was ritualistic. Number 19. Nick is now cross-examining Pearl Knitter. He asks her questions about her. Oh, go ahead, Bean.
I said this should be good.
Yeah. Well, Courtney made a point to text and say that Nick is like the most insufferable person she's ever had to listen to, so I'm sure this will be really good. Nick asks her questions about her education. He comes in hot like a total asshole. Do you get paid to testify, to do this stuff? Do you have training to identify this stuff? Do you have books or training exclusively on Odin? And she says no, but plenty of focus. How do you educate yourself on Odin murders if there aren't any? Racist Odinist group ritualistically targeting 2 white children, and she says no, I haven't ever seen it. Very aggressive, yes, yells, oh. Nick very aggressively yells yes or no when she tries to elaborate. Jesus. Ritual is done over and over, right? So why hasn't this happened again? And she says that's not correct. That's not a correct definition of a ritual. He asks, are there any universal symbols? And she says no. And he says all identifiers, cause of death and body position are most important, exsanguination and knife to neck. Nick says it's significant to you, right? Why is he so mad? Goodness. Oh my God. Okay. Nick says, why do you assume it's a knife? And she mentioned that it was serrated in the autopsy. Nick says, what if it was a box cutter? She says, yes, any sharp object. I've seen a letter opener. It's a culmination of many identifiers. Nick says, we're talking in circles here, and I'll go all day if you want. This will go a lot quicker if you just answer my questions.
That sounds like a threat.
Is she not answering his question? Right, why is he acting like she's a hostile witness? Like, there's no jury in the room. They're not on trial. Like, what is he doing? Oh my God. He asks, were these sexually motivated? She says, not to me. I typically see a sexual assault in a sexually motivated crime, which indicates the defendant Oh, indicates defendant said he killed them before he got to sexually assault them. Nick says, not trying to cover the body, and she says, absolutely not. The body's not covered. It's minimal. He says, what if the defense or defendant says the sticks were covering body, would you believe it? And she said, no, it wouldn't change my mind. They weren't covered. And then this is I think our last page. Nick and Perlmutter continued. The defendant said he confessed, but he had no Odinist ties. Would you believe him? And she said, no, it wouldn't. Oh, wait. If the defendant said that he confessed, but he had no Odinist ties, would it change your mind? And she said, no. There was unusual blood spatter pattern on Libby's face, per the report. In September 2023, he asks, were you on court TV? Saying classic ritualistic before seeing evidence. Diener looks over at Susan Hendricks with a huge shitty smile on her face, continues smirking as Nick hammers witness. Baldwin brings up race trading. Oh, right, race trading, like, yeah, trader, okay, right?
Yeah.
State says that the sticks were an attempt to cover, sexually motivated but killed too soon. Crime scene staging was undoing because he felt bad. Box cutter. This is Courtney's theory on what Nick is pushing here. That the sticks were an attempt to cover the girls, that this was sexually motivated, but the girls were killed too soon, and that the crime scene was staging was an undoing act because the killer felt bad, and that he used a box cutter. Cool.
Is there an entire theory that it was a box cutter based on the statement? Because
Yes.
that's what it's starting to sound like.
100%.
They're actually going to go with that, like regardless of whether it was a box cutter or not.
Yeah, and it sounds like regardless
of, box.
Right, regardless of whether or not that's what the autopsy report says too.
Yeah, it just doesn't sound like a great theory.
Right.
I'm wondering if they're just taking this stance just temporarily for this hearing, you know.
Right.
Like they just want her to not be a witness. They just want their items in Limine not to get in.
How is he getting so mad at it? How is he getting so mad at an expert in a pretrial motion in Limine hearing? We're not even anywhere near. Like, that's so stupid.
Well, I mean, obviously they're putting a lot of weight on.
Right.
I mean, they must see a lot of danger in entering the Odinist type stuff. Like, they really don't want it in, and that's what I was saying. Where they put emphasis of what they want to allow in and what they don't. Where they really fight on something, you'll be able to tell what's important to them. So they really do not want anything related to Odinism coming in.
Why? Because they want it because their suspect doesn't have any Odinist ties. That's why. Because Odinism means that it can't be this bad.
And the third party suspect is compelling, you know?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Skeptic Curiosity. Thank you. That's so nice. Yeah, his questions were not good, Judge Jessica. I agree with you.
I kind of get going with what Royal Wee says here. He hasn't actually tried many cases. His experience is based on watching Law and Order. But yeah, I don't know. He might just be getting some practice, you know, like and treating this like, you know, like trial witnesses just because he hasn't done it, you know. So he's just getting his reps in.
Right. Steven, what if Ron Logan practice Odinism. We don't know a lot about Ron, but from my research on Ron, he was a weird guy and he was into a lot of weird shit. And I could see him being involved in something like this. So, I mean, I don't know that focusing on a particular suspect is even the right move, or maybe you just focus on the aspects of the crime scene, because this defendant that they're defending has nothing to do with what they found at the crime scene, right? In my opinion, I don't think that they have to solve the crime, but clearly
Right.
it doesn't match their defendant.
And that brings up, like, you know, even if like you can't mention specific third parties, I mean, they're gonna be able to. I mean, I don't see any way that they can't try to make a case that
Right.
this scene was ritualistic in nature. Like, that's they have every right to make that argument.
Mm-hmm. Susan, I've heard this before. Actually, we've talked about, I think a lot of us have talked about this, and I've never seen any like proof one way or another. I would believe it. I mean, Ron had people stay with him all the time for various reasons, but my point in saying that is that I don't think that the specific third party matters as much as the fact that this was a particular kind of killing, most likely, and it's a killing that just in no way matches the man they arrested, you know? It just doesn't. Right, and it's reasonable doubt, right, at the end of the day.
I thought it was interesting that she said that the body positioning was everything.
Yeah.
Like, because I'll have to, I might retweet it, but you know, I found, you know, there's like basically like Odin yoga that like some people do in like, I mean, if you see the pictures or the, you know, the drawings of the crime scene, how the bodies were positioned, you know, by my eye, I would call it like an exact match to certain positions that they do in this like Odin yoga stuff.
Odin yoga?
Kind of, yeah. They do
Yeah.
like body positioning. You know, you do it yourself, but like it's odd that it appears matched exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Chat is learning that there are in fact serrated box cutters.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
They're
box cutter tips break all the time. Yes, they're made to snap off. You just break off like the piece by piece.
right. That's how you replace the blade, or yeah, that's how you dispose.
Or not always. Sometimes I mean, they have the fixed blade ones. I guess the cheaper ones like they'll break. You'll break off the new piece, but there's the kind that you like also just flip, and it's like it's a, you know, the box cutter end on both sides, and when one side gets worn out, you'll just like open up the tool and then flip it around and use the other side.
Yeah. It's funny. So, what do we think about this? I have a lot of questions. I'm very interested for Holman's. If they can find him, where the fuck is he? Where the fuck does he go? He's never where they need him to be when they need him.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the defense wanted to call him, and he disappears for that. Convenient.
Dork. Okay, so I think what I'm coming away with is independent of what the murder weapon was. This just further convinces me that the singular piece of evidence that the state is banking their entire case against Rick are these incriminating statements. Period. That's it. That's all they have, because it shouldn't matter. Like, it just shouldn't matter what weapon was used, because they don't have the murder weapon. So it shouldn't fucking matter. The fact that Rick said box cutter, Nick needs it to be a box cutter. He needs it to be, because that's all they fucking have. Like, that's it. That's so idiotic. Like, that's it. That's all they have. I really believe that.
I mean, it seems like a dangerous, I mean, it seems like a dangerous strategy too for them, that I think that you're going to have a hard time convincing a jury to ignore everything else and only focus on, hey, this is what this guy said, so it must be true. Like, okay, but what have you got? Like, a lot of evidence that points to other things. Like,
yeah,
they're not going to be able to use the evidence in their theory, because it
right.
doesn't. Their theory is only based on a statement.
Yeah. Well, and even if so, Hoosier said here, Fiend, that you had found some receipts that people were mentioning box cutters like early on. I 100% believe that. We've also heard that they used.
Oh no, I don't remember people. I mean, maybe somebody. I don't have those receipts, but but yeah, I don't. Last week, we didn't hear everybody. We didn't hear everybody believing it was a box cutter, but now they'd probably think the weapon was. I think everybody was pretty adamant the weapon was something else in their head.
Right. Well,
so
and like,
we're just changing our minds based on one thing.
Right. But regardless of what, I mean, we've heard, so for 6 or 7 years, speculation has run wild. We've heard every kind of weapon was used. We've heard that a bow and arrow was used. We've heard that chemical gas was used. We've heard that a hunting knife was used. We've heard that a garrote was used. I mean, naturally, yeah, I think that probably a box cutter has come up before. But I mean, that doesn't mean that the autopsies, I'm probably going to trust the autopsy more than the incriminating statements of a psychotic, severely mentally ill man. I just.
Right.
Where is the fucking evidence? Like, give me one piece of evidence and I'll be more open. But we've seen nothing. There's no fucking evidence.
Right. And I mean, that's the maddening thing about it all, because like, certainly, like, there is a lot of evidence. There's a lot of crime scene evidence.
Right.
And like, other than, like, we're not made aware of it, like, certainly not from the state. Like, they don't seem to be having any interest in bringing in the crime scene evidence into their case.
Nope.
Even though ton of it has to exist, and unless they've like lost it or destroyed it, I don't know, but we haven't heard about that either. So you would imagine we would, the defense would take objection that all the crime scene evidence has been destroyed. So I think that, like, all that crime scene evidence does still have to exist, but why aren't they bringing it into their case?
Beats the fuck out of me. I have an idea as to why, but hi, DB, you're back. Welcome back.
Hello there.
What do you think?
Think about what?
In general, we just want to know what you're thinking. Penny for your thoughts.
Did something happen today?
Not really. Holman's gone. We lost Holman again. We should try and ping his phone. Maybe we could find him.
I think you need a warrant for that, don't you? Or you have to submit a probable cause affidavit to ping somebody's phone within 72 hours of doing it.
I don't think so. It's an exigent circumstance because we don't know where he is and we want to know.
Right.
So.
But even if it is exigent circumstances, they still have to do it 72 hours later, don't they? Per statute?
Maybe. I feel like that's a suggestion.
Well, for certain Indiana state troopers.
Certain Indiana State police detectives just kind of use those guidelines as mere suggestions. But anyway, so what else is
Did they prove it was a serrated blade?
That's what she said from the autopsy report.
I bet Nick was so Nick didn't announce in court that the autopsy said it was serrated. It came out through his
No,
belittling
the witness,
the witness.
yeah, the witness said it in response to him. Yeah,
Is he the worst?
he wasn't wanting that answer, I'm sure.
Nikki
Is
baby,
he the
what are you
worst prosecutor we've
doing?
ever seen ever, or what? Actually, the only one that may be worse is Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, Morrissey,
Yeah.
that was pretty bad. But we're not there yet, you know? It could be worse. It's the worst prosecutor I've seen so far.
So far. Good point. Good point, Susan. Yeah, just plant a magic bullet. You can get a judge in Indiana to sign a PCA, especially if that judge's name is Benjamin Diener, and then he'll recuse himself that same day that he ships your guy off. I wonder how Ben's
He wrote the
doing.
motion for him.
He literally
the
wrote. Okay, this is what I think, and
Go off.
it's never gonna happen. Thank you. I'm about to.
Dun, dun, dun.
Rick being in DOC, they got him there illegally because they put him there without a fucking hearing based on lies. Tobe wrote an affidavit, gave it to Diener. Diener rewrote it, so Diener authored the safekeeping motion himself, and then moved on his own safekeeping motion that he authored, granted his own motion, and then illegally, without a hearing, while the defendant is unrepresented, puts him in DOC pre-trial, even though there were places for him to go in county jails. He was in White County, fine. There was no reason for them to do that. And then Diener immediately recuses him from the case the same day that he does that. So Rick is in DOC illegally. It's an illegal transfer. So in my opinion, any evidence that is obtained at DOC is obtained illegally. Therefore, fuck this hearing. Why are we here? These incriminating statements don't mean dick. That's how I feel. What do you think Gull would feel about that?
I do think that I don't know about the legal justification for it, but it does seem like the sort of fruit from the poisonous tree kind of idea that, you know, and they've kind of seen this with the warrant, and the whole reason for the Franks is that, you know,
yeah,
they're, you know, they got a bad, they're doing something bad and they're getting stuff from it, but even when they do that, the stuff that they're getting hasn't ever been all that great. It's just all they've got.
Yeah, it's better than nothing, but it's basically nothing. But it should be nothing because it's meaningless. Sorry, go ahead.
When you have a guilty person and you fabricate evidence and you break the law, you have somebody who's going to fight it out in the courts and maybe win, but everything kind of fits. It kind of makes sense. It was just obtained illegally, right? When you have somebody who's going to be wrongfully convicted, or you look back at a wrongful conviction case, the theory doesn't make sense.
Right.
When, even if they obtain this information illegally, if it's strong, we should understand more about the case than we did when we started. And that's just simply not the case here.
Right.
Yeah, there hasn't been much development on a theory. We basically don't even know what their theory is, and they've been very reluctant to state it. The only thing that's been developed is, you know, as much as it may seem implausible to people, you know, the defense has detailed out a lot, you know, and they've backed it up with reasoning and you know, evidence of things. And where is that on the state side?
I am understanding more and more acutely and intimately why Gull will not allow cameras, because this is a fucking shit show.
That's a comment here from Travis. Well, Ange, law enforcement and Nick are simple thinkers. If there's an object at the murder scene that has suspect's DNA on it, where you would expect it to be, like a suspect in the woods, the cartridge is critical. That's all they have.
Clearly. I agree.
And all I says it's because they didn't solve the crime. Right.
Of course not.
If the crime was solved, this stuff would all start kind of falling into place. And for some people, it does fall into place. So I can't say much about that other than it doesn't fall into place for me. You would think some stuff would start to make sense. Some stuff would start to line up.
Do fucking better. I'm so frustrated when people, justice for Abby and Libby, how about you solve the fucking murders? Like, that's justice for Abby and Libby. I'm so tired of hearing that advocating for due process. What? Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm behaving myself, DB.
I know you are. I'm
being so well behaved.
And I just want to take a second to say that perhaps there has been a lot of, and I hate using this word, Fiend said he hates using this too, but virtue signaling online, sharing stuff about the victims, but a lack of action, lack of people wanting to talk about what really happened,
right,
and what the issues are before the court. So it's just maybe that some people are upset and they think that just being on social media and talking about the victims isn't what the victims themselves actually need right now. They need people to look at what actually happened in this case and solve this case. A lot of people don't believe it's solved.
It's not fucking solved.
Travis says tool marks on an unfired cartridge isn't junk science. Junk science in Indiana, unfortunately, and there are Indiana cases where that was the only evidence, and the ISC confirmed the cartridge has been taken into. That cartridge has to be taken very seriously, and it probably will be taken very seriously. The case that Travis is talking about is Indiana versus Turner. It was a case where they matched a firearm, a tool mark. Science of tool mark evidence is you take a tool, something that provides a mark, leaves a mark on an object, and you compare it to see whether or not the mark matches the tool. In this case, they had two objects that were marked by a tool in Indiana v. Turner, and they didn't have the tool. And they proclaimed that these two objects came from the same tool without the tool being in evidence. So you can see how low the bar is in Indiana for having this type of evidence come in. And it's troubling. This is also a case where they say a Kalashnikov style rifle, which is either an AK-47 or an SKS. A lot of those are stamped. They're not very accurately made. And they would have probably more unique markings than a German manufactured kind of halfway collector's item, because it was not a police issued hand-me-down that the 6 Sauer that Richard Allen owned. And so because of that case, it's likely that there's going to be no challenge. There's no Daubert, there's no Fry in Indiana. They do kind of do something similar, but mainly whether or not you can cross-examine the evidence when it's at trial is the matter, really.
Right.
BB, what do you think about this comment? Rochelle just dropping bombs today, by the way, always.
Rochelle.
She's like crushing it.
I thought it was Rachale, but go ahead.
Yeah, that's it.
I'll read it. You want to read it or you want me to read it?
No, I want you to read it.
Okay, I'll read it. But they had access to all the internal issued 6 hours they could dream of and swap that part. And the cover goes high up. The cover up goes high up. You know, I don't even... I get that some people like that theory that it's planted and everything. For me, it's like a lie detector. You can't trick a lie detector because it's nonsense. It's either right or wrong, depending on who fucking knows. It's not science. It's not able to be recreated. And much like the matching of an unspent round, based off of a single point comparison, you just it's not a real thing that is generally accepted by the NIST or AFTE as a way to compare rounds. So if you do say it, that it was that, like, it doesn't even require a planting. It doesn't require corruption. It requires a misapplication of science. And that's oftentimes what leads to wrongful conviction.
Right. Whether something is science or junk science has nothing to do with any court. In like, if a court like allows junk science to come in, I mean, the way that there's not. If you can't do anything about that, what you're going to end up doing is just having somebody that knows science come in and explain that this is junk science, and I'm sure that they will do that.
Well, it's not
And
even junk science. It's not science. Like,
right.
of course, junk
It's
science
just-
isn't science, but like, no one's even trying to pass that as science in any studies. It's just bizarre.
Hey, Team Trader.
Okay, can I talk about this real quick, and then you guys can go, as long as you want, without me.
Keep talking. I'm sorry I interrupted that. Keep talking. I was just saying hello to our
Okay,
friends.
no, I got it. So, Tim Prater asked, he says, I agree that the cover-up starts over the election because it was lost for him without an arrest. So this is something old Ange and I have arm wrestled over a couple times. We all know the theory that this happened over an election, right? That the person running for sheriff dearly wanted to be sheriff, and he decided to do what he could to get an arrest. And part of that was, combing through these old tip narratives and finding this information and getting the arrest, right? Well, I think that in a way it could be somewhat motivated by the election, but I think that Holman, when he interviewed him on the 26th and arrested him, the issue was he wasn't arrested before on the 13th when Mullen and Liggett interviewed him, interrogated him, but they didn't have the bullet matching yet. The lab came back on the 19th saying that the unspent round from the crime scene matched the 6-hour PT-206. Why didn't they arrest him on the 19th? Probably because Mullen and Liggett did not think they had enough to get an arrest warrant. When Holman found out about this, as I played in the clip earlier, he said he wants to be the guy. He wants to be the one. He's going to stop at nothing to make an arrest in this case. So he decides that he's going to have Alan come in knowing that he knows this bullet matches now, and he's going to get the first good run at him with this new evidence. He comes in, he designs this ruse to have Kathy Allen drop him off, probably takes his keys, his phone, all that stuff. Or maybe he had it on him. I'm not sure. He had his smokes on him, right? But he says, hey, were you Mirandized and everything? You talked to those guys 13 days ago? Okay, cool. Yeah, no big deal, Blocks the door with his chair and starts berating this man who has done nothing but been helpful up until this point. And Rick Allen says, I will not stand for what you did to my wife, probably embarrassing her, harassing her with questions that are inappropriate, probably, that she didn't want to answer. Who knows what else that he could be talking about there? We don't know. And then he says, basically, you're going to pay for what you've done, harassing me and accusing me of this crime. And Holman said, I don't know what it is that you've done, but you did this and I'm going to prove it. And Rick said, okay. And then he was under arrest. And once Liggett and Mullins found out, they did not decide to shut it down. It was going to benefit Liggett because of the election. He didn't have what he wanted to go out on the limb and make the arrest himself, but some hothead went and did it, and they had to reverse engineer an arrest warrant. They had to reverse engineer a PCA, and so it benefited them for the election, but not necessarily like directly, like how some people, I'm not saying you, Ange, some people may think that the theory is a lot of people that disagree with the theory were like, oh, you think he just arrested him, that's it, just because he wanted to win the election and that's the only reason? No, it's just that it benefited Liggett not to push back on Holman's wanting to, like when you're young, you got that crazy friend that's always trying to fight.
Right.
And then you kind of get into a little squabble, you get into a little beef, and your buddy jumps in, and you're just like, oh, thank God, let this psychopath deal with it. Whatever, dude. I'm not gonna get the assault charge. It's like you're just letting this other person potentially take care of it. And if it goes bad, it's on them, but you're ultimately going to get a push from this to hopefully win the election. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think that's much more plausible and palatable as far as, it's not a conspiracy and concocted motivation to make this arrest, but because there's benefit, you don't not make the arrest.
Maybe. What about the Orion tip that they found on September 21st? I don't believe that for a second.
All eyes.
I don't
I
believe
mean,
that.
it's weirdly. I mean, the real weird thing about the Orion tip is just that they had the story that it was like kind of like lost or whatever, and
Yeah,
that the FBI immediately, said that is not true. And which makes sense because you can't really have a lost Orion tip. It's just like, it's a database. It's like there's,
they were going to solve this crime before the election, period. They were going to, period. That's how I feel. I don't think necessarily that they knew who they were going to arrest. I think that they were pretty confident at up until like August that they were going to arrest a Klein for this murder, and that did not pan out. And so back to Orion we go. I mean, I just don't believe that they just happened upon this lost tip of this uncontaminated suspect that they could. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make sense is the biggest part of it because, I mean, there does seem to be some reason that this tip was not, like, it was either deemed unreliable or not credible or
The FBI
or not relevant because they didn't even follow up with Rick Allen. So
right.
what was it about this tip that made it that way? Like what is the specific, like, we still don't know that. Like, I speculated maybe that it could have been confused that it referred to a different day because they haven't provided that piece of information regarding this tip. Like,
a little story time real quick. The first time I ever talked to Fiend on a live, I said, well, then Doolin, he took the tip, and Fiend went, no, we don't know if Doolin even took the tip. And I was like, oh my God, this guy is hard to debate. I've seen people just waffle in front of him so many times. And then, I got up there and I was like, here I go. And he hit me with that, do we know Doolin took the tip? I'm like, damn, this guy's going all the way back with these questions.
It is, but it's really strange, man. When they reference that Doolin brought forward this tip in the search warrant, but when they rewrote everything for the probable cause affidavit, they removed Doolin's name and put investigators instead. And it's come from a lot of different places, but there's just a lot of speculation that the DNR officer that actually like met with Rick Allen and took his tip was Skinner instead. And I don't know. I think that there's like I don't know which is correct, but it is really strange to remove Doolin's name for your probable cause affidavit. Why not just keep his name in there if it's accurate?
This is another thing here about interchangeable parts. I just want to touch on this really quick. These are not unique marks. So the reason why we think like a layperson may think this is really good evidence is just because of the how DNA works. So like when you have a match with DNA, you can exclude every other person in the world because we know what every other person's unique genetic identity is because it can be calculated. And so we know that we can exclude everybody, right? But unless you test every single firearm and every single extractor, every single rifling mark, we cannot exclude every other gun to any degree of scientific certainty. That's why it has to be an individual match based on a subjective examination, and it's usually a multiple point comparison and not a single ejector mark.
So that makes this a problem.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a problem.
That's a big one. That's a big old prob. Okay, so then we had a question earlier about O apostrophe Ryan about Orion. Where's that? That was funny. That was like the Irish version. That's like the Irish version of the FBI database.
Oh man.
Here we go. I understand that must have been confusing. So this is how it's spelled: Orion, Orion. It's basically a information aggregator for that the FBI uses for critical incident response. So there's some really, really amazing research by a lot of really good creators. All Eyes is one of them that has a ton of research on this and can probably explain it. I think she has at least one video about the tip, but the issue with the Orion is like this should be facing law enforcement facing to where they are cataloging the tips to be able to be searched and understood again in the future. I think the issue is, as we all know, data generally, one of the rules is garbage in, garbage out. And, if you're putting in information incorrectly, that's an issue. But also, they still have this Orion system up very early on in the case. And an issue with that is they started just getting inundated with a ton of tips. And what you see in cases like this and the Idaho 4 is that the tips are an extreme burden for the defense to get through. So say there's 50,000 tips and each tip is a paragraph. Think about the amount of evidence, of raw leads inside of those tips that have to be parsed through. If you're going out and doing press conferences that are riddles and mysteries, and you're showing pictures and multimedia and audio, and then the video comes out, you got 2 sketches, imagine how many tips you're gonna get. And they're probably a lot of tips that you're attracting are not going to be the highest quality. So you're getting 50,000. Oh my God, my XYZ looks like this. Bullet striations. So bullet striations are reliable because of the uniqueness of the barrel, but ejection and of cartridges is not good science. Well, bullet striations mainly are reliable because when you fire a gun, that means the shell casing in which the charge is held in, which is usually made of brass or nickel, is a much softer steel or metal in comparison to the inside of the firearm. So when that explosion happens, the brass expands and presses against the chamber, leaving chamber marks. And there's also a firing pin indentation, which is one of the most unique marks a bullet can have. So because of that and the rifling and the actual bullet traveling and having marks on it, there's multiple points of comparison. You may have 5 total points that you could compare, but when there's a firearm that's fired, you may match 3 of those things, right? Because you have more to compare. But in this case, you have a single point of comparison, which is the extraction mark. And that's why generally the comparison of an unspent round usually can only obtain something like an extraction mark, maybe a magazine. If a magazine has a metal burr on it, you could maybe get something unique like that. But I see Travis here. DNA doesn't exclude everyone else. They use the statistics to show that they practically excludes everyone on Earth. The report for too much is much worse. Well, so if the chance of your DNA matching is 1 in 14 quintillion, for example, I would say that it would exclude all people on Earth because there's not that many people on Earth, but maybe that's not the right way of thinking about it. The rest of your comment, I'm sure, will be great, but the report for too much is much worse, of course. And the issue with the tool mark evidence is you may find something AFTE or something like that that says that there's a 92% accuracy rate or something, right? But that's if you exclude unknown, unmatchable things like a shell casing. So say you have 100 cartridges to look at, and you say 5 of them are for sure a match. 5 of them are for sure not a match. The other 90%, I have no clue. So you're putting 10 matches or exclusions forward, right? Say you get 2 of them wrong, or say you get 1 of those wrong, but you've also not answered 90% of them. You get a 90% on this test, but you haven't answered 90% of them. You said 90% was inconclusive. That's how those are done. That's how that study is done. I think the main study is the Knowles. There's an FBI study that maybe it's the NIST and FBI study that really bore this out. It did not go well for this science. But in this case, too, you have to consider that they said that if you look at that report, that evidence report, they said that they collected the firearm, and fired 3 rounds, collected the unspent rounds for comparison. Once they were done with the comparison, they shipped them to NIBIN. That's the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network, I believe. So do they have these casings still? Ames, that's right. Thank you, Big Fish. Yeah, the Ames study is what I'm talking about. And if you guys are up on this, you'll know that an FBI agent filled out the probable cause for a search warrant for one Ron Logan's home. It did not include any probable cause that included an unspent round possibly being inside. Because the NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology, the federal science branch, determined that was not a viable way to match. So it would seem that the FBI would not want to use that evidence. Ballistics Special Agency, whatever. Sounds like some made up mumbo jumbo, prosecutor BS. I don't know if that's what he said. If Ballistics Special Agency. There's the NIBIN, AFTE, well, it's acronyms, but. And then we have FICAP was clearly neglected. Yeah, I mean, there was some reporting requirements. Hey, Criminal Network, what's up? Hey, Criminal Network. My bad the other day. I didn't mean to sound like I had beef, dog. We cool. And then criminal ... and RL was missing a 40 caliber gun. I didn't know he was missing one. Yeah. I did see something earlier too about law enforcement. And that round, yes, is a very common law enforcement round. However, Looking at Carroll County. True. Carroll County's issued weapons and Delphi's issued weapons. I believe they all had either 45s or 9mm, unless they had a grandfathered weapon. I do believe ISP used to use a 40 caliber. They're using something different now. The FBI uses currently a Glock 17 or 19 40 caliber full-size battle pistol. And it said that ERT, the evidence response, yes, that's correct. They did. They used 6-hour P226s. We'll get into that sometime next week, probably. Well, not even like, so if you go back to 2017, everybody who owns a Carhartt jacket owns a 6-hour. Just kidding, of course. But like, if you own a Carhartt jacket, I mean, you might have a gun. And what are the chances of it being 40 caliber? I mean, pretty good. And I've seen people suggest that they knew that the gun was a 6-hour before they found it, and they were looking for 6 hours. That would be very surprising to me. They may have said that, but this science is done using matching to an individual weapon to a subject cartridge. So it's not that you can identify what weapon a round was cycled through by just looking at the weapon, but you can identify if the weapon used or the weapon had a tool mark that was unique to it. Yeah, they wouldn't know that it came from a 6-hour unless they had the SIG. Right. They would need to do an individual comparison. ACAB says ballistics are bullshit. Well, this ain't even ballistics, dog. It's crazy that the smoking gun in the case without a fired gun is an unspent round. Your case says Doolin's allegedly submitted the info via Orion. That's not, and I get why I get that makes sense, right? Like he said he took the tip and then the tip got entered into Orion, right? Well, did he enter it into Orion? Or did he leave a note? Did he put it like on a piece of paper and then give it to the call center that was using or running the tip line? Because it was in town. Or did he hand off his notes to somebody and then they lost them? Because where's the notes, right? This is supposedly, they don't have them anymore. They have whatever was entered into Orion. But okay, I get your point, but I'm not seeing that. It makes sense that he submitted it, but like I don't see any evidence that there wasn't an intermediary. Leah also used the 40 caliber. That's right. Look, and Murphy were there today. Very good. Murphy's a legend. Click, obviously, all-time legend. Anybody who pisses off old Jer Bear is a friend of mine. He called the tip line. How did the person on the phone forget him too? How did they call him to schedule the interview? They didn't get his contact information. Why not detain him? Well, why also did Did Doolin get dispatched to that? Was he dispatched? Did they have a CAD system, computer-aided dispatch system? Or was he just stationed there for the day, taking statements from people that may know a thing or two? Doolin was at the February 22nd press conference, and Criminal Network probably has some video of that on their channel. Check it out. I'm crumbling, but thank you, Cleveland Rocks, my biggest fan. I heard he was on a brisk walk with Gray Hughes. You guys ever see that Gray Hughes footage of him doing a brisk walk? Yeah, assigned where? He was assigned the lead. Was he assigned it in the system? Was he assigned it in? Oh my God, okay, I gotta go. Thanks, bye.
Okay, so sorry everyone. Thank you, DB, for your voice talents and brilliant thoughts and all the things. It is hot as fuck outside. Holy shit. I hope everybody is staying cool and having a good afternoon. We're gonna adjourn until we hear from Courtney again this evening. I imagine, based on the fact that they still need Pullman, Amber, and I think, wasn't there one other witness they were going to call? I don't know. But I suspect that it will probably be a lengthy afternoon. It is hot as Lucifer's ball sack. I am about to take I need to cool.
Hey, real quick. Sorry to interrupt.
Hey, no, I was going on a very important tangent.
Yeah, I heard. Hey, so, Ange, can you tell them that you're going to tweet out the typed up?
I am going to tweet out the typed up notes. Thank you.
I would like to thank the ladies, guys. Hey, if you're a guy out there, let's get a sausage fest going for the next set of notes, okay? Stop making the ladies always type the notes.
Well, if you want something done, well.
So you got to tweet them out, bye.
Bye. So I'm going to tweet them out, and we're going to wait from Courtney. Oh, right. Brad Holder, we were told he was for sure going to be a witness. Maybe for the state, then, I imagine, right? For their rebuttal, probably. I don't know. But where are you? You don't have to tell me where you are. Don't. Southern Hemisphere. Yeah, that's totally true. Okay, I'll send out another link here shortly, and we'll tweet out the notes ASAP. And thank you, everybody who contributed, and we will talk again soon. Thank you, Fiend. Thank you, DB. Thank you, all of the people in the chat. Okay, bye.